China's Evergrande Group is quickly becoming the biggest financial worry in China and the world. Fears of a default by the developer, with 300 billion in liabilities and links to banks, have roiled global markets. Chinese Evergrande Group was founded in 1996 in Guangzhou. The company expanded rapidly with massive borrowing. Evergrande Real Estate owns more than 1,300 projects in 280 cities across China, and at the end of June, it was committed to building 1.4 million individual properties. The company goes far beyond just real estate, with investments in electric vehicles, a theme park, a soccer club, and a food and water company, with more than 200 offshore and almost 2,000 domestic subsidiaries. Evergrande has about 2 trillion yuan in assets. As such, a company facing potential defaults could have devastating global consequences. Evergrande had a liquidity scare in 2020 when they reportedly sent a letter to the local government of Guangzhou, warning that payments due January 2021 could cause a liquidity crisis and potentially even lead to defaults in the broader financial sector. Such reports emerged and were leaked to the general public on September 24, 2020, which sent Evergrande's stock and bonds tumbling. While the company dismissed the concern, crisis was averted as a group of investors waived their right to force a 13 billion repayment. However, that was just temporary, as many more payments were due in the coming months. Evergrande needs to make 669 million in coupon payments through the end of this year. Some 615 million of that is on Evergrande's dollar bonds. Next March, 2 billion of Evergrande's outstanding bonds comes due, followed by 1.45 billion the following month. The company has already missed several coupon payments, though many of the notes have 30-day grace periods. The Evergrande crisis has had a snowball effect on many developers across China. Vantasia Holdings Group in early October defaulted, and Cynic Holdings Group said days later that it didn't expect to pay a 250 million payment due. Property firms' missed payments have made a staggering 36% of the record 175 billion yuan in onshore corporate bond defaults this year. This brings up the question as to will Beijing bail out the struggling company? The government could offer a lifeline to Evergrande. Beijing has instructed authorities to map out a plan to manage Evergrande's debt, including coordinating potential buyers of its assets. Likewise, renegotiations with banks and other creditors regarding payment deadlines have occurred. However, this will only provide temporary relief, and as of this moment, there is little sign of a direct rescue. So why wouldn't Beijing rescue the debt-ridden company? A direct rescue via bailout would essentially encourage a reckless borrowing initiated by Evergrande. It would also set a precedent that the state would always come to the rescue and bail out struggling companies. This, however, is risky, as a default would have a snowball effect on the Chinese financial system, which would be felt by millions of Chinese homeowners, which would have a damaging impact on the Chinese government. Evergrande, which for years now has been one of the most indebted developers, made some questionable business moves years ago, which has added fuel to such crisis. In 2015, the company initiated a 130 billion yuan fundraising round from strategic investors that contributed to a cash crunch late last year. In 2017, it branched out into electric vehicles, eventually pledging to take on Elon Musk and Tesla to become the biggest electric vehicle manufacturer. There are about 1.4 million property owners who have paid deposits and are waiting for Evergrande to deliver their property. However, with the ongoing liquidity crisis, it seems unlikely that any of those houses can be built or finish being built. Trouble is brewing in the broader Chinese real estate sector, which could impact property values. This could be turmoil to the Chinese housing market. The consumer is seen to be a big factor in the Chinese economy, thus, a big hit on the consumer will have broader effects. Residential property markets equal 20% of Chinese GDP. while real estate activity in general accounts for about 30%. Evergrande's contagion fears ripple through Asia's primary market. The Evergrande crisis is having broader implications across the globe. Investor demand for Asian dollar bonds is dwindling as credit crunch among Chinese property firms ripples through the region's markets. Orders for notes from Asia, excluding Japan, with 3.6 times their issuance size last month. This is the lowest since August 2019. Contagion risks are rising in Asia's offshore credit markets, as a clampdown on Chinese property firms prompts rising default risks and threatens a broader economic slowdown. How Evergrande's collapse would cascade through China. The serious risk of a default is raising increased concern for the potential domino effect of small and medium-sized business failures. Evergrande could cause illiquidity for its suppliers, most of them being small to medium-sized businesses that rely heavily on large customers, not only for business but also to access finance, often in the form of credit extended to Evergrande by their sellers in order to move their products, this being supply chain finance. Supply chain finance is a set of processes aimed at improving efficiency and lower costs. For instance, Chinese suppliers wait a long time to get paid by their customers. This squeezes their working capital. To bridge the funding gap, many companies turn to supply chain financing. Instead of waiting to get paid, businesses go to a third party that hands them cash quicker. This is a big benefit, as companies struggling to borrow can use their assets as collateral. However, this is an issue when repayment becomes an issue. Cracks begin to quickly appear up and down the supply chain. This is what ultimately caught up with Evergrande. Inventory makes up a huge portion of its working capital, and as that deteriorated, bills began piling up. Additionally, Evergrande leaned on vendors and other parts of the supply chain, not just the mainstream financial channels. The fallout of the collapse by the developer will cause vast groups of suppliers to experience immediate financial distress, possibly creating a chain of bankruptcies across a broader system. The Evergrande crisis is just a broader issue within the whole Chinese real estate market. Mark Williams, a chief economist at Capital Economics, estimates that about 30 million properties remain unsold in China. That's nearly the entire population of Germany. About roughly 100 million properties have been bought up but are not occupied. This could accommodate 260 million people. Such projects have been scrutinized for years and described as China's ghost towns. For decades, real estate has helped China achieve rapid economic growth. However, also many critics have questioned whether such growth was a ticking time bomb due to the massive debt many developers have taken to pay for their projects. Evergrande has simply become the poster child of unsustainable growth, with more than 300 billion worth of liabilities. Although Evergrande is certainly the biggest company struggling, it is certainly not the only. 12 Chinese real estate firms have defaulted on bond payments totaling about $3 billion just in the first half of this year. That accounts for nearly 20% of total corporate bond defaults in the first 6 months of the year, the highest across all sectors in mainland China. As the economy in China attempts to recover from the impact of COVID, it seems as though residential property demand in China is entering an era of sustained decline. Over the last few months, housing starts and sales have tapered off considerably. In August this year, floor space sold dropped 18% compared to the same time the year prior. Also in August, new home prices were up 3.5% from the year prior. However, this was the smallest growth since the property market rebounded in June 2020. Another issue is that of unfinished projects. Regardless of demand, about 90% of new properties in China are sold before being completed. This means that if setbacks appear, it could directly impact buyers. How will the Evergrande crisis impact the rest of the world? The Federal Reserve warned that the weakness shown in China's commercial real estate sector could spread to America if it continues to fall. The Fed's Stability Report, which is meant to highlight risks that could undermine the global financial system, said that the stresses in China could strain global financial markets through a deterioration of risk sentiment, pose risks to global economic growth and affect the United States. While Evergrande has managed to pay overdue coupons at the tail end of the grace period, its dollar notes remain at distressed levels. Many creditors are preparing for a debt restructuring that could rank among the largest in Chinese history. Essentially, many widespread consequences of an Evergrande default include unemployment, a drop in Chinese stocks, and deflation, which in turn could spread through global trade channels as China cuts its purchase of goods from other countries. However, despite potentially having some form of a spillover effect, the risks are small due to the nature of China's financial system. A period of sustained decline in the real estate market will impact China for the near future. Although Evergrande and many other companies are in dire situations, this is not the case for every developer. Most developers in China are not on the brink of collapse. This, however, may only provide some credence for the short term, as successfully navigating the sustained declining housing demand over the coming years will be challenging.